Hello and welcome to this session on the Mini Mac project. My name is Rob from Steam Labs, and in today's video we are going to be having a look at how you can use a Raspberry Pi 3 or 4 or even a Raspberry Pi 0 to create a retro Mac. Now this is quite a lengthy video and I've used my iPhone to record some sections and also a Windows computer and my Mac, so we're going to be kind of switching between different devices. But I'm going to be showing you how you can set up a very cool project using a Raspberry Pi, a Waveshare display, and actually create a retro Mac. Now, I have taken this project from Instructables, from a very cool author who has showed us how we can set up a old school Mac 3D printer case. And what I'm going to do today is show you how I got started with this and how I helped one of our students at Steam Labs actually go through this entire project, and I think he is just 10 years old. So without further ado, let's check out what you need for this project and let's get started. At the beginning of today's video, we are going to be focusing on a old school retro Mac project today using the Raspberry Pi 3. We've also done this on a Raspberry Pi 4 as well. However, we have had to adjust the build of the files which are listed on this Instructables page. Now, first of all, let's have a quick look at who this author is. I do believe that the author of this is a person who actually set up the retro project on the old school Mac for the Raspberry Pi. On this page, you're going to be able to see a list of all of the resources you are going to need, which we're going to be using in today's video, and just how we went through this step by step with one of our 10-year-old students at Steam Labs. Now, I'm going to switch over to the beginning of today's video now, and let's have a look at the different steps which we followed to complete this project. Okay, so first thing which we are going to do before we install the drivers is you need to make sure that you have flashed your SD card with a brand new operating system for either the Raspberry Pi 3 or Raspberry Pi 4. So I'm going to write this onto our SD card, and whilst this is being written, I'm going to show you the different files that you need to download. So if we go down here, there is going to be some documentation which we can follow for the Waveshare display, and there is a zip file which we need to download. Now I have already downloaded this, and I'm going to come back to these instructions in a second. So first of all, we are going to go over to our folder for our device. And we've got the folder here for our Apple Pi, so we are going to double click this and check out what is inside here. So first of all, we have got our Disk 1 DSK image, we have got our Mac 2 ROM image, we've also got the Mini VMac ARM image, and also this other image down here. Now we are going to need these different files. So again, I'm going to highlight the ones you need. So config 1, we're going to change that to config a bit later. We're going to need disk 1, Mac 2, Mini VMac, and also Mini VMac ARM image. So I'm going to highlight the files which we need to set up the display correctly. And also down at the bottom here, these are the Waveshare files which we are going to need. So heading back over to this page, once we have flashed our SD card with a new operating system, which is the standard Debian operating system for the Raspberry Pi, we are going to need to get our config file, which has been downloaded here. And we are going to want to replace the file which is in the boot folder of our SD card. Now also we're going to have an overlays folder, and we are going to want to dump these files in the overlays folder as well, so we are able to read or pick up the display once it has been connected to the GPIO pins. Now one of the most important things here is that we set up the IP address on the Raspberry Pi, and we also enable SSH so we can connect to it through CyberDuck a little bit later. So once this has finished flashing, we are going to boot up our Raspberry Pi. We are going to access it through a standard display so we can configure SSH, and also so we can change the host name. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to skip and I am going to have a look for the standard instructions, which is setting up your Raspberry Pi. So whilst our SD card is writing that new operating system, we are going to go down here and have a look at how we need to set up our Raspberry Pi 3. So one of the things that we are going to enable here is going to be SSH, and we also need to change our password, and we also need to change our host name and make sure that it is also up to date by going into Preferences, Raspberry Pi and Configuration. So let's wait for our SD card to finish and then jump over to what it looks like on our display.
Now, just to make everything a little bit easier for me, what I have done is I've stuck my SD card into my Raspberry Pi cluster, and then on my screen up here, we're going to be able to see that the standard operating system is booting up.
Now, what you're going to be able to see up here is I'm actually holding up my mobile phone to do this, just because it is not going to be visible as I've got no screen recorder set up on my Raspberry Pi. So we can see up here that we've got our standard image and I've got an Ethernet cable plugged in. We're going to go through the standard setup configuration. And what we need to do here is we need to set a host name and also a password. Now, I have set a host name and a password, so I'm going to click on Next. And the next thing it's going to ask me to do here is, do I want to resize my screen? The answer is yes for this option here, just so I can see all of the options. And I'm actually going to skip the Wi-Fi configuration for now, and I'm going to set it up once my Raspberry Pi has booted, because I've got an Ethernet connection right now. So I'm going to press on skip, and then I'm going to press on next. And what it's going to do is it's going to now look for updates. Okay, so once it's up to date, you are going to need to reboot your Pi. So we're going to select on OK to reboot, and it will now reboot. Okay, so once it's rebooted, there are a few different configurations which we need to make. So I'm going to go up into my top menu in the left, and we are going to need to change the host name of our Raspberry Pi and also set our password again. So we're going to go into Preferences, and then we are going to go on to a Raspberry Pi configuration. And the two different things that we want to change here is host name, password, and also enable SSH. So you need to change your host name and then your password. And then over here in interfaces, we are going to enable SSH. Now, one of the things that I skipped in my last step was configuring Wi-Fi. So we can see up in the top corner, I'm connected through Ethernet. So you are also going to want to have a look for a wireless LAN as well. So wait for it to find your access point. So I can see that it's found my access point, and I'm going to set the password, and then we are going to need to reboot our system again. Okay, so we are now back over on our computer. We have inserted our SD card into our computer, and we have completely set up the operating system using Debian Linux, and we have configured our wireless IP, enabled SSH, changed our host name and our password. So the next thing which we are going to have to do here is transfer these WaveShare files into our overlays folder, and also change the config file for the standard config file which is in our boot menu. So I'm going to go over to my SD card over here, and one of the things which we are changing first is this config file. So I'm going to go into my Apple Pi downloads folder, I'm going to copy this file over and then paste it in here. And we are going to want to replace the original file. Let's paste this one in first. And we can see config1 is here. We now want to rename this file as mentioned in the instructions. Let's label this as old config file. So let's right click, show options, and again, we need to right click on the correct file. So rename, and we're going to say old config. Now, our other config1 file, we now want to change this, and we want this to be our standard configuration file for when the Raspberry Pi boots. So get rid of config1 and just have config, and then this is all that you need to do. Now, the other things that we want to copy over are these WaveShare files here. Let's confirm that these are the correct ones as per the website. So we have got WaveShare display 35 dpi, we've got WaveShare 35 dpi 3b, 4b, and then we've also got this one down here as well. And when it is referring to these different options, I think that this may be also linking to the different Raspberry Pi version which we're using, and we've also got this VC4 file as well. So we're going to copy these and take them over to our overlays folder on the Raspberry Pi, and then scroll to the bottom
and then we should pretty much be good to go. If we paste them in now, we'll be able to see that this VC4 file here, the original files which we were using were not here before. There were some WaveShare files, but they do not match these ones. And this is pretty much everything that we need to do. So the next thing is we are going to connect to our Raspberry Pi using CyberDuck and SSH to transfer the remaining files from our downloads file. And then let's see if we can get our Raspberry Pi booted up on a WaveShare display, and let's see if we can continue with the configuration.
Now done is we have plugged our SD card back into a Raspberry Pi, but as we have changed the settings in the overlays folder and we've copied over those overlay files which are provided from the website which we were just using, the Raspberry Pi isn't actually going to be able to boot if you are trying to get it to load up with a GUI, so in other words for desktop. So what we have done here is we've opened up CyberDuck as also suggested on the website we're using for this build of the Mini Mac. So I've added my server name which is applepi.local, so I don't need to know the IP address as we have already set the host name, and I've changed the protocol which we're using to SSH and entered our username and also password. I'm now going to press on connect to see if I can connect to this to then transfer those files. And it's saying, do you want to allow the fingerprint? I'm going to select on allow. And what we're now going to be able to see is we are on the Raspberry Pi. And what we are going to have to do, as per the steps in the guide which is on the website, which I'm going to bring up now, what we need to do is transfer over those files. So I'm going to scroll down, and what we are going to do is we are going to have a look for the step which says collecting your software. Now I'm recording this both on kind of Mac and Windows just because I can switch between these easy enough, and my main operating system is Mac here. So I'm going to open up that Apple Pi folder, so same Apple Pi folder and resources which I was sharing with you a moment ago. We're going to go into files for Apple Pi, and we're going to need to identify the different images which we're going to need to place into CyberDuck. Now their suggestion here is we go into desktop and then we create a new file. So the different files which we are going to need here, it says we're going to need to have a mini VMAC ARM image. So if I look over here, we've got our mini VMAC ARM image. We're also going to have our mini VMAC ARM and then 2x image as well. So both of these are required. And the reason is because it doubles the pixels for an easier to see version, just because our screen size is going to be different. And we're going to want to put these into a mini VMAC directory. So over here on our desktop, we are going to create a new folder, and we will call this again mini VMAC. And we're going to press on create, and we should now have our folder here. Now there's another couple of things which we need here. So it says we also need to have a ROM image which we can download from this link here. So over here I've got my Mac ROM image, but notice that ROM in my case is not capital, and it absolutely should be if we want to get this to work. So I'm going to go over here and then put capital ROM at the end and press on enter. And then there is one more thing which we need, which I do believe is our disk 1 image. And over here on this tough dev link, we are looking to download this file, which is the HFE 500M. We're going to download this, and we are going to resave this as disk1dsk. So let's select on download and see what we find. So old Mac softs, and once opened up, we're going to be able to see that we have the files which we need here. Now it is really important that we use the clean image here. So I'm going to extract whatever we can find in here. So we are using a pre-made system. So let's unzip, so extract. And this disk image, we are now going to want to save it, just like me over here, as disk1.dsk. Now that we have got all of the files which we need, which are the ones which I'm highlighting here, we want to transfer these over to our Raspberry Pi using CyberDuck, and then we are going to connect the cable, so the ribbon cable which goes into the screen and then also onto the GPIO pins on a Pi, and then we're going to boot it up. So let's transfer these files. Now, something which I'm just going to have a look at is this instruction over here. So inside our downloads folder, before I do insert the SD card to our Pi, it is saying that we need to move the following into our VMAC directory. So not only do we need the disk 1 image, but it also looks like we need the Mac 701, the Mac 753, and the Mac 755. So what I'm going to do is also unzip these files. And inside this Mac 701 folder, we're going to be able to find 6 different images. So let's upload all of these onto our SD. Let's do the same with Mac 753 as well, and drop it onto our SD card. And the last one is the Mac 755 up file. So again, let's unzip and let's drop it onto our SD card. Now all of these files have been transferred. Let's boot it up and see how this is working. Okay, so over here I have got my Raspberry Pi 3 and I have plugged in my screen, so I've got the film on, which is why it looks a little bit like this. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to insert my SD card. Now I'm powering this from my computer, so is the Raspberry Pi going to be able to have enough power to boot? I'm not sure. I'm going to plug in the cable and let's see if we get the light appear on our Raspberry Pi. So we can see that it is booting up. But what I'm also interested to see is, do we get any output on this screen here, and does it actually boot? Now, this symbol over here looks like it is having an issue with power, but let's see if anything does load. Now, this does look like it has been successful. So we have managed to set up everything, and this has been quite a long video. And over here in the top right-hand corner, we can see that it is connected to Wi-Fi. The next thing I need to do is connect a mouse. Okay, so also now I've connected my mouse, I want to see if we can get it to respond. So this is a touch screen, so we can see that I was able to just touch that icon over here and we will manage to select this. Using my mouse over here, I'm going to double click this folder, and then there are a couple of things that we have to do in here. So if we refer to the instructions on the website, we actually need to make sure that we can execute these different files here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my mini VMAC ARM image, and we are going to go into the properties section, and we are going to see if we can make it executable. So I'm going to select on permissions, and we want to change execute nobody to anyone, and we now want to press on OK. And now that we have done this, we want to be able to see, can this actually boot? So I'm going to double click the icon and see if we can load our virtual Mac image. And we're going to select on execute. And let's see if it does load up the Mac operating system. Now this does look like it is successful. It is starting up Mac OS, and this pretty much brings us to the end of this section here. Now the next thing which we are going to want to do is probably plug in a proper power supply, and we're also going to want to have a look at how we can connect our Bluetooth speaker. I'm going to shut this down for now, and we are now going to move on to how we can actually attach a Bluetooth speaker and put it into our case. So this is booted back down now, and we're now going to go into our Bluetooth settings. Okay, so moving on to this next section, I did say I wanted to have a look at how we could attach our Bluetooth speaker, and what I have done is I have designed this in Onshape, which is going to be a custom mount for our speaker. And what I'm going to do here, not in this video, is I'm going to drill a hole through this and actually attach it on the inside of the case. And I will come to setting up our Bluetooth speaker at the very last part. Now I have gone with this very, very funky orange color. So this is the PLA color I chose for the mini VMAC build. And I will also do an overlay of a video of the printing process as well. Now what we are going to want to do here is actually put our Raspberry Pi inside. So we are going to push this in. I'm not going to do the part of attaching all of our screws in here today. We're going to need to take out the USB connection whilst we do insert this.
And this should fit nicely into the case, okay? If you are using a Raspberry Pi 4, you are going to need to try to adjust the build instructions. If we attach this and move it towards the back, you should see near enough all of these holes do line up. Now, also skipping forward as well, you're going to be able to see that I have placed my screen on the inside. You are going to need to have a look at where you need to attach your screws and also your fork disc to stop the screen from falling out. And also, so you have the funky little insert here. I have gone with a nice wood color. So if I remove this and insert this now, you're going to be able to see that it does allow us to distinguish between the front of the case and what would be the disc insert up here. Now, when I resume this video, you're going to be able to see that my mini VMac has been put together. Now, after lots of fiddling around, this does bring us to the end of the video. I did say I'm going to show you how to attach the Bluetooth speaker, but apparently I left this at my other office today. So now you can see a full build of our mini VMac using the Raspberry Pi 3. As I mentioned, you can use a 4, but you're going to need to make some changes to the case in order to make this happen. Now, I hope this has been great. In order for you to launch your mini VMac, you're going to need to use the image file, which we can find in here, which is going to be our mini VMac ARM image. And if you do check out the page on Instructables, you'll also be able to see how to get it to boot from scratch. Now, hopefully this has been good, and looking forward to seeing you in another video soon.